ضيفتنا القادمة جاءت في رحلة مدتها 22 ساعة عشان توصل للسعودية وعشان تشاركنا خبرتها في مجال الرسوم الاحترافية وتحويل الأفكار، تحويل الخطط بطريقة احترافية. اللي كانوا متابعين حسابنا في تويتر أمس واليوم ما شاء الله أخذت العرض اللي كان قدمه أمس ماثيوس وحولته إلى رسومات. أخذت العرض حق ماتياس وهو جالس يتكلم حولته إلى رسم ورفعته على تويتر. فهي متخصصة ومحترفة في مجال تحويل الأفكار، تحويل الكلام، تحويل الخطط الاستراتيجية إلى رسوم بشكل محترف وبشكل بسيط وجذاب. So I'm going to introduce our next guest. She took a 22 hours flying from California to come and here and share the experience and the knowledge of drawing facilitation. She is an expert and professional in drawing and transforming ideas, presentations, plans to a very beautiful and attractive professional draws. She is the director of the digital facilitation in growth. She is an international speaker, and she is presenting this presentation for the first time here in Saudi Arabia. Please join me to welcome Mrs. Rachael Smith.
It's my pleasure to be here. This is my second visit to Riyadh, and I am delighted to be able to speak to you today. Thank you so much for welcoming me. I would like to share with you the process that we use at the Grove Consultants for strategic visioning. But before we do that, I want to tell you a little bit about the Grove Consultants and the way that we work, because it's a little bit different. We're based in San Francisco, California, and everything that we do is supported by what we call visual practice. So, as was mentioned in the introduction, it involves some drawing, but mostly it involves visual organization of information. So we will come into a room and put a huge sheet of paper on the wall, and while we facilitate the meeting, we'll take notes on the paper live and while the meeting's happening, while facilitating at the same time, which is called graphic facilitation. There is a second way to do it, which is where a facilitator partners with a graphic recorder, and the graphic recorder does the notes on the paper and the facilitator runs the meeting. And that's another way to bring visual practice into a meeting. So I can do both of them. I was asked to share these with you. These are the notes that I did this morning from Matthias Mangel's talk. And I used my iPad to do this. It was graphic recording, since I wasn't facilitating. I was simply recording what I heard. So those are my notes. They're available on Twitter and Flickr if you are interested in looking at them more closely. But the idea is that I listen and I capture the key points of the talk. Obviously not every word is there, but I capture the key points and turn them into a visual record that can help you remember the content of the talk. So we use visual practice at the Grove, and another word about the Grove is a very small company. There are 12 of us, 5 consultants, and then a design team and some other staff. And we go all over the world to do vision and strategy, team development, and facilitate all kinds of meetings. So I want to share with you our process for doing strategy development and helping a group come up with a vision and a strategy and figure out how to implement it, since, as Matthias said, it's easy to come up with a strategy, but then what happens after that? So our process covers everything from no strategy all the way to we have a strategy and now we need to carry it out. So it's a process that takes the group all the way from vision through to action. It helps them tackle difficult issues and concepts in a visual way. And it's not all about drawing. There's a common misconception that graphic facilitation means a lot of drawing, and that's not necessarily true. It's more about organizing the information visually so that it's clear to people how to read it, how to read the display, and remember what they talked about. Our process is very much about the group's ownership of the vision, so the group creates it together. It's a shared vision that everyone participates in creating. And we have consistent results with lots of different clients across different industries. So for example, we've used it with the industries named here: architecture, healthcare, software and technology, education, not-for-profit groups, membership associations, manufacturing, retail, and many, many others. You can see in this picture a little bit of what it looks like when a group is graphically facilitated. So you can see the size of the charts posted on the wall and the facilitator working with the chart while the group is contributing. So what is strategic visioning? Strategic visioning is what we call strategic planning, and we use the word strategic visioning because of the visual component and because we encourage groups to create a vision, a shared vision, before they devise the strategy. So you need to know where you're going. If you don't know where you're going, then any map will get you there. So we help people figure out where they're going and define that very clearly before they create the map of how to get there. We support the process with templates. So what you're seeing in this picture are several of the templates that we use. And you also have this flyer at your seat. So if you'd like to follow along, it has pictures of the templates and the model inside. The templates are huge. You can see here the scale with the facilitator standing next to a template. They're 4 feet by 8 feet, so about 1.3 meters by almost 3 meters long. Very big. And the idea is that the whole group can see what's being written as it's being written down. Our strategic visioning model has 7 stages. And the first stage is on the upward side there on the left, preparing. Stage 1 is preparing. So that's when you get ready to do the vision, and we talk to the client about what their crossroads issues are. And crossroads issues are the big questions that when they decide the answer to the question, it will lead them in this direction or that direction. So as if you were standing at a crossroads and had to choose one direction over the other. So we ask them their crossroads questions. We ask them what their key outcomes are for the process. And we help them understand our methodology. The typical process is 2 days to create the vision and the high-level strategy, and then a follow-up session to create the more detailed strategies. The second stage is exploring and learning, and during that part of the process, we help the group think about things like their history, the past, where they've come from, and get ready to embark on the visioning process. The third stage is agreeing on current realities. So during this stage, we encourage the group to do an outward-looking environmental scan and find out what's going on in the world that will affect their industry, and also an inward-looking activity or exercise, which might be a spot matrix, it might be looking at their value proposition, it might be looking at where their projects are currently, where their time's being invested in different projects. So they look out and they look in. And then as we cross over into stage 4, up to this point, the group has been doing very concrete thinking. So they've been looking at what actually has happened in the past and what is actually happening right now. So they're exploring the real world. But in order to come up with a vision, they have to leap into the future. They have to take a leap of imagination and think about what could be that isn't yet. So during that stage, between that transition between 3 and 4, we really help them shift from that concrete thinking to creative thought, which is a difficult shift for a group to make. But we have a special part of the process that helps the group make that switch. Then stage 4 is opening to a vision. So that's when they imagine the possibilities, what could be possible, and then make choices about what actually they will do. Then they move into stage 5, creating strategies. And at first, they create very high-level strategies or initiatives to support their vision. And then as you move into stage 6, implementing change, that's usually the follow-up meeting where they create the detailed game plans that will let them carry out each initiative. So at the end of that meeting, people leave understanding what the broad vision is and what they personally need to do to achieve it. So you walk out of the room knowing, what do I need to do to make this vision happen? And that's a connection that can be very hard for people to make because the vision is so big and so broad that it can be hard to know what you personally should do And then finally, stage 7 is up at the top. It's called Living the Vision. And that is where the organization goes on to distribute their vision, explain their vision, implement the things in their strategies that will help them achieve the vision, and continue to do those checks. So the things that Matthias said this morning about having review meetings and updating your vision and doing tune-ups to your vision, all of those things happen in the Living the Vision phase. This is a picture of the inside of the flyer that you have, and it shows the whole process and a typical template that we use to support each stage of the process. So there are some different ones that we can substitute in and out, but these are the typical ones that we use. And I would like to show you an example, a case study that was done with an architecture firm. And this case study that I'm going to share with you took place 15 years ago, and the architecture firm designed a 5-year vision, and they tuned it up. They checked their results each year, and at the end of 5 years, and then at the end of 5 years, they called us back to create another 5-year vision, and at the end of that 5 years, another 5-year vision. So we're just doing the 3rd one with them right now. It started with a 2-day partnership planning retreat, and the senior leaders came together. This meeting was facilitated by David Sibbett, who is the president and founder of The Grove, where I work. So all the senior leaders came together to come up with the vision for their company and the strategy for how to carry it out. So the first thing that we do in the preparing stage, this happens before the actual retreat. And this is where we find out what are the client's outcomes, what are the key questions that they want to engage in. And we support that with this template, which is filled out prior to the meeting, before the meeting, and then we bring it in and hang it on the wall and go over it. So it starts with the outcomes on the far side, and the outcomes are what does the client want to get out of this process? Usually it includes a vision and a strategy, but there may be other outcomes as well. The agenda is how they're going to get through the 2-day retreat to make those things happen. And then the roles are a way of defining who's in the room and what they're going to be doing. So a lot of people have never seen visual facilitation before, and it's very unusual. And we come in and hang these pictures on the walls, and they go, well, what are you doing? So the roles let us explain what we're doing and also what their job is in the meeting. And if there are any other roles besides the facilitator and the participants, we would list that here as well. And then the rules are rules for how the group is going to behave together and how they're going to get their work done together. So some common rules that we use are step forward, step back. So step forward and say what's on your mind, and then step back and leave space for someone else to talk. In the United States, we have a lot of rules about cell phones and mobiles, that we have to ask people not to use them during the meeting or to step outside so that they don't disrupt the meeting. I don't know if it's true here, but one thing that happens for us is one person will pull out their phone and check their email, and then someone sees them and says, oh, I need to check my email too. And before you know it, everybody is looking at their phone. So that's a problem for us. So that's usually a rule that we have. When people come together, any group comes together to get something done, they have 5 questions that they want answered right away. So when you come in and sit down in a meeting, you have these 5 things on your mind. And until they are answered, you can't really focus on the work. And the 5 questions are, why am I here? Who are you people? What are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to behave? And when can I leave? And if you answer those 5 questions, people will give you their attention and go along with you on whatever journey you want to take them on. So this template answers all 5 of those questions. This is what it looked like prior to the meeting, when David filled it out after meeting with the client to find out what their outcomes were and to come up with an agenda and share the agenda with them, then revise the agenda, so this is the final one. So he brought this into the meeting and hung it up, and then as he was introducing himself and setting the stage for the work that the group would do, the group has some changes. So once again, that's the original, and then that's the edited version during the meeting. So you come in with an idea and a plan, and then you work with the group to make sure that it's going to work for them. So you change. He added outcomes, he added rules, and the rules, it's very important that everyone be able to agree to those rules. So you have to go through them and make sure there's agreement, and if there's not, you have to change them. And then some groups will want to add different rules that belong to them. So that's what that happened there. So then we move into stage 2. And we complete a look at the history of the group. And usually, as a guideline, we try to look back twice as far as we're looking forward. So if we're doing a 5-year vision, we try to do a 10-year history. The history is a very interesting session. It's a storytelling session rather than a fact-finding session. And people will say things that don't agree with each other, or someone will remember something one way and someone else remembers it another way. Sometimes you have people who've been with the group for years and years alongside brand new people. And the storytelling session, the history session, helps them all come together through the history right up to today. So that whatever things they're carrying around and they brought with them and are on their minds, they get it out in this first session, and then it doesn't interfere with the rest of the meeting. It can be a very fast-paced and exciting session. It's very difficult to record it. This is a double-length paper, so this is actually 16 feet or 20 feet long, so maybe almost 7 meters long. And as you can see, it kind of shows the path that this company has gone through up until this point. And after you collect all this information, you take a moment and say, well, what did you learn at each of these phases? And what do you want to carry forward, and what do you want to leave behind? So it helps the group really reflect on the journey that they've already come on as they prepare for the next stage of their journey. So stage 3 is when we start to look out and do the environmental scan. And this is the template that we use to support the environmental scan. So the company is there in the center, very small in the center, and the world is all around the company. And we've done this process at the highest level with the executive teams and the CEO. We've also done it at departmental levels and at team levels. So it works with any level in the organization, and just whatever level you're working with is what goes in the center. So if I'm working with the whole organization, then the center is the organization. If I'm working with the HR department, then the center is the HR department. And what makes this particular conversation work is that you take time ahead of time to think about what are the categories that you need to discuss, because they're different. They're different for different industries, and they're different for an organization versus a department versus a team. So up at the top of the arrows on the left and right, where it says trends, you have to select which trends you want to look at. So I was doing this process with a company that makes video games, and they wanted to look at trends in the entertainment industry and trends in the video game industry specifically. But then when I do it with healthcare, they look at very different trends. Obviously, they want to look at healthcare trends, things like that. So you have to make sure that the categories are tuned for the group that you're with. And then you have the discussion there during the meeting and ask people, well, what do we know about the trends? What are we seeing out in the world right now that's going to affect our decisions and our choices? And you can talk about, these are some common categories that we use. So political factors, if that's relevant, what's going on in the world of politics that might affect the company. What's the economic climate, because that usually affects a company. What are the technology factors? Technology changes at such a rapid rate that that's almost always a relevant category for any industry, because it's going to affect what they decide to do. In the middle at the bottom are the customer needs, and that's actually where we start, by identifying who the key stakeholders are and what they need. And this is an interesting discussion sometimes, because sometimes people get it the wrong way around. So as an example, I was leading this process at a university, and I was talking to a room of faculty, staff, and administrators. And I said, well, who are your customers? And they said, well, of course, the students are our customers. And I said, okay, and what do the students need? And one of the faculty members said, well, they really need to grow up, and they need to turn in their work on time, and they need to not play when they should be working. And the problem with that is that's not actually what the students need, that's what the faculty need. So when you're looking at customer needs, you have to put yourself in the position of the customer and say, okay, no, if you are a student, what do you need? And when they looked at it that way, they said, oh, well, the students really want their textbooks to be available on mobile devices. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. So you have to make sure that the customer needs really do reflect what the customers need. This template can be created just with the information that people have in their heads, but sometimes we assign this as pre-work. So we might give one group of people the assignment of, okay, do some needs analysis and come to us with that data. And another group, we would say, go look at the trends in such and such an industry and come back with that data. And then the session is a report out of what they've learned and then a discussion about it. And when you fill it out in the meeting, people have a lot of input for this particular conversation. They really want to talk about it, and they really want to get down to the details. But when they're done, they have a really good picture of the things that are going to affect the choices that they're about to make as they do their vision. So for this one, this was an architecture firm, and they looked at the architecture and engineering business environment, and they kept economic, climate, and political factors as two of the categories. They kept customer needs and technology. But then they wanted to talk about people, demographics, so who are they serving? And they also wanted to talk about their service differentiation, so how are they different from other architecture firms? So after they've done that, sometimes they do a spot matrix, and this group did one, but obviously I don't have a picture of it here. And the spot matrix gives them an opportunity to really look closely at themselves, and that's part of stage 3. But after they've done those 3 things, the history, the context, and then whatever internal focused conversation they have, like the spot matrix, then it's time for them to open to a vision. And this is where they have to make that shift from concrete thinking to creative thought. So in order to help them do that, we have an activity that is going to sound very strange. And when we explain it to clients, they often say, I'm not sure I can make my people do that. But I've done this with hundreds of groups, and I have never once had a group absolutely refuse to do it, although I suppose it could someday happen. So what they do is they work in small groups, and each small group of maybe 5, 6 people gets a copy of this template at a slightly smaller size. And then they have 45 minutes or so to come up with a story. So the idea here is that we've come through the past, we've looked at the present, so we know right where we are today. And now we want to figure out, where do we want to be in 5 years? So the group imagines that it's now 5 years in the future. And instead of looking ahead at what they want to do, they're looking back at all the wonderful things they've already accomplished. So they imagine that their vision has been completed, created, and carried out perfectly. And they've just had wild success. So this story is a story of the group or the organization getting written up in a magazine of their choice. So it should be something that's prestigious, that they would want to be featured in. And they're the cover story of this magazine because of the wonderful things that they've done. So their job is to brainstorm first what those things are, and then write some headlines that would go in the article that describe the things that they've done. Then sidebars, which are the more detailed, maybe case studies or interest stories, things like that. They have to come up with some of those. They have to come up with some quotes, and they're allowed to quote anybody they want. So they can imagine that the President of the United States is saying things about them, anything at all. So what are the wonderful things that famous people are saying about them? And then they draw a cover for the magazine. And after that's done, they have a few minutes as they're in their small groups to prepare a presentation of this information to the larger group. And the rule here is that they have to prepare the presentation and give it as a story, a skit, or a song. So they're not allowed to stand and point at their chart. They have to actually show us what the vision is. And that's where some people say, well, I don't know if we can do that. But it turns out that in a private setting where the group is really working on their own issues, they actually do really well, and it's the high point of the whole exercise. There's a thing that happens when you do any kind of divergence and convergence work. So visioning is, it follows that pattern. You diverge with brainstorming and you come up with a lot of different ideas, but eventually you have to choose the ones that you're going to use. You have to converge. And that's very painful. Brainstorming is fun and easy and very upbeat, but making those choices is painful and hard. So what this does is it gives people an emotional lift, because they have so much fun with these presentations. If I could show you videos, which sadly I can't, but if I could, you would see these people have so much fun acting out their stories and really sharing the things that they're passionate about. So it puts them in a very creative, emotionally happy state of mind, and then they start to do the brainstorming and the selection of the vision items. So the small groups each create their vision stories. This is an example of one. If there were 5 groups, there would be 5, and they would do 5 presentations. And then at the end of that, oftentimes the visions include things that are real and likely, but they also include things that are just really wild and out there, but that's okay, because those things are often the seeds of something really great. So we ask them to think about what they heard and identify what the major themes were. And those themes become the vision part of their vision and strategy. And that takes a long time. That takes 2 to 4 hours to come up with those themes, group them, prioritize them, and then choose the ones that they actually want to do. But when they're done, they end up with the top half of this chart filled in. And that's their vision. That'll be their vision. Then they go through the same process to come up with the strategies. So this is what it looks like when they're coming up with the vision. It starts with a bunch of sticky notes with ideas on it. They work those sticky notes on flip charts to come up with the actual wording that they want, and then they create the vision, and then they do the same thing with the strategy. So the vision is what they want to achieve, and the strategy is how they're going to achieve it. And they go through the same process. What are all the things we could possibly do that would get us to this vision? And then which ones do we actually want to do to get us there? And that gives them the initiative level bold steps. So usually 5, sometimes more. This group had 6 initiatives that'll get them where they want to go. So there's their final strategic vision for this company. And then in a follow-up meeting, they do the detailed strategy. So they take each of those 6 bold steps and break it down into the things that they need to do over the next 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, up to 5 years to make those things happen. And they do that in small groups, and usually each initiative is supported by a certain group of people in the whole meeting, and so they'll work on their initiative. Not always, but usually. And then they present the game plans, and those are their strategies and game plans. And with this group, when they moved into living the vision, they carried the work into the future by having, there were 40 top managers in this group, and they developed a global sense of their company and their business. They had agreement on their 5-year plans going forward. Everyone received about that size color copies of all the charts that were created so that they could tell the story and remember it later. It was featured in the company's annual report. And this company, one of the things that they wanted to do in their first 5-year vision was become the top-rated architectural firm in the United States. And with their vision and their strategy, how to carry it out, and then they followed their plan and they did their reviews, they actually achieved it. And 5 years later, they were the top-ranked architectural firm in the United States. They also update their vision every 5 years, and they do tune-ups in between. And achieve their goal, as I said. So thank you so much, and I enjoyed sharing that with you. I hope it was interesting, and I'd be happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rachael. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have questions from the sections, okay, can we take?
Thank you, Mr. Rachael, for your great presentation. You really did a great job. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Just 2 or 3 questions. When after designing the vision, do you think it's also important to design the mission statement and the values of the company before tackling the strategy? And is it also, do you think that the strategy duration is just 5 years? Not the strategy, I mean the vision. It's just 5 years, and we have to update the vision every time we have to update the strategy. Thank you very much.
Sure. Let me repeat your question and make sure I understood it. So the first part of the question was, when they're doing the strategy and the vision, is it also important to do the mission and the values? And then the second part of the question, I'm not sure I heard the whole thing, but it sounded like you said if they're doing a 5-year vision, do they...
Update every time
the strategy?
The strategy.
Thank you. So usually we will ask the group when we go in if they already have a mission statement and values. And often companies do have those things. If they don't, then yes, we can help them develop that if that's something that they want. And it's very useful to have that going in. The mission statement is sort of the 100-year vision. So what never changes, what keeps you going, why do you do what you do? So we think of the mission as the why, the thing that drives their choices. Then the vision is what specifically are you going to do because of your mission? And the strategy is how are you going to reach the vision? The values are what support all of those choices that you make day to day. So they are integrated like that, and we do work with them to find out if they have that, and if not, to help them develop it, yes. The second part of your question, we do recommend that the strategy be refreshed when the vision is refreshed. The vision is a limited scope because it is intended to be achievable. It should be aspirational, but it should also be achievable, something that they can do. The strategy is how they will actually reach that particular vision. They're very closely tied. So once the vision is updated, then yes, the strategy should be updated as well. And usually the things that were in the first strategy have been completed or partially completed. And so you need to know, what do we do next? How do we keep working toward our mission? Does that answer your question?
Thank you very much for the presentation. I have 2 quick questions. The first one, how much time the process takes? And should I?
Go ahead.
Okay. The second question is how can you make sure that the strategy is balanced?
Balance?
Yes.
Balanced?
I mean, when you put top management together, they might focus on financials only and not the other perspectives of a strategy.
Thank you. Those are good questions. Yeah, so how long does the process take? We recommend 2 days for the development of the strategy and the high-level initiatives, and then a follow-up either half-day or 1 day for the game plans. We have companies all the time say, can you do the vision, the strategy, and the game plans in 4 hours? And, no, you won't get the same results. It really does take a lot of time. It's important work, and it takes time to do it. So we recommend 2 to 3 days for the whole process. And then the second question, how to make sure the vision is balanced, is partly the mix of people in the room is going to help with that. So you want to make sure when the meeting's being planned that you have senior leadership from the different levels of the organization. If it's an organizational vision, you need to include the different departments and make sure they're there so their voices are heard. So that helps a lot. And then the second one is, as we're working with them, we can help say, this seems to be very heavy on the financial section. Have you thought about the technology or whatever? So we can ask those questions as well. Thank you.